Welcome into another edition of the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, thrilled to have Carter Karels back with me, fresh off his wedding, a honeymoon, all the fun, kind of jealous. First off, congratulations, man. Welcome to married life and welcome back from your honeymoon.
Thanks, man. Couldn't be happier. It was a really fun week in Cancun, and yeah, loving life, man. This is great.
Tough life, right? You got to come back and we got a super regional this weekend in College Station, a really intriguing matchup between Texas A&M and Oregon. So how Texas A&M got you? They got you with a 3-game sweep in the regional round over Grambling, Texas, and Louisiana. And I know they were kind of, as there are during a regional, right? Like Jim Schlossnagel's kind of talked about it before, that almost a regional is harder to get through than sometimes a super regional, because you get into the losers bracket and suddenly you're having to maybe play a doubleheader on Sunday. You might have to win 2 games Sunday night and Monday. Texas A&M didn't have that problem, but in extra inning games that could have gone either way against Texas. But A&M ends up coming out on top in all 3 of those games, and now can kind of turn their focus to the super regionals, which is what you play all year for, right? A&M needs to win 2 out of 3 against Oregon to advance to Omaha for the second time in 3 years. And, I think this series is interesting because, and we're going to dive into a lot of it, but you look at this past weekend, right? And, Friday A&M comes out and shuts out Grambling 8-0, has the big second inning to kind of take control of that game. And then it kind of felt like kind of cruise control the second half of that game with the game in control. And then a 4-2 win over Texas in a rivalry game on Saturday night, where the bats just, really struggled with some of Texas's pitching, but were able to took advantage of some breaks late in the game, an error on a bad throw, and do enough to get a win. Got a great break with a ball bouncing off the bag. And then you kind of see the bats come to life on Sunday against Louisiana. I think that's kind of the good place to start, because that's kind of where you hope, these bats are trending, right? And heading into this weekend. Braden Montgomery hits a homer. Hayden Schott hits a homer. Caden Sorrell had a pretty good weekend. He was one guy that really stood out the second half of the year. Ali Camarillo hits a homer. So some really good signs. Just where do you think this Texas A&M offense kind of is right now? Having watched them in this regional and over the past couple of weeks, like, do you feel like we're still kind of in wait and see mode heading into this weekend in terms of where the bats are, or where do you kind of feel like A&M is on that front?
Yeah, it certainly isn't where it was first, first couple of months of the season, where big majority of the season where, they've breaking their home run record, right? And a lot of that damage was done, early on. They were hitting the ball on another level through the first, really until the last couple of weeks of the regular season, maybe. And so they're not where they were there, but they still have it. It's not like those guys don't exist anymore. They still have Jason Rowlett. They still have Braden Montgomery, Gavin Grahovic. So, they have it in them, but, clicking all at the same time, that's the question. And I think this is the series where you're going to get the answer to that question, because Oregon, their pitching's been on fire lately. They really only had to use 6 pitchers in their last regional because of how great their starting pitching was. And, we'll get into that as well. But I think this is the weekend where we'll kind of figure out, okay, is this A&M offense back? Like we saw the signs against Louisiana. You mentioned it. I think those first couple games were pretty frustrating if you're an A&M fan from the standpoint of, like, man, is this offense going to get it back? Like Grambling, they had 7 runs in that second inning, but outside of that, they really didn't do anything in that game. And then against Texas, it kind of required some luck a little bit. Like you had the error, you had the weird hit to third base that Ted Burton had that scored in a run. I shouldn't call it luck. Like that makes it seem like they didn't deserve to win, but like it just was like weird stuff happened for them to win. And so I think that Louisiana game was so good to see because it was like, okay, this is the team that, you're used to seeing. So we'll see if it carries over to Oregon, but I'd say that's the number one question going into the series is, hey, did that Louisiana game, was that cathartic game that they needed that pushed them over the hump and kind of got them out of that funk? Or, are we going to see some of the struggles that we've seen against a pitching staff that's been on fire lately?
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of read, right? And it's one of those things we're not really going to really know until they take the field on Saturday. Through Monday, they had the hitters meeting that Jim Schlossnagle kind of referenced after the game about getting back to kind of what this offense does well, and it's not trying to do it all yourself. It's being okay with taking a walk and pushing it to the next guy and trusting the guy behind you. And I do wonder how much of like there's just that kind of sigh of relief when you do put a game like that together and can enter this week with a lot more positive frame of mind and kind of exhale a little bit. We'll see what type of effect it has because it was one of those things where it's in there. It's just a matter of is it going to click? Is it going to be on time? But I kind of would at the same time bring the reminder that they did go 3-0 in a regional. And so, you're talking about a team that found a way to win all 3 games and did go 3-0 in a regional. So I think that's important to remember as well. You can always kind of look, okay, this should have been better. This shouldn't have been better. This should have been better. But I think the other encouraging, and this kind of feels like the difference maybe between past years, and I know it's probably not where Jim Schlossnagle wants it to be yet, but from a starting pitching standpoint, this kind of feels as good as A&M has kind of felt heading with, at least from a top 2 standpoint, heading into a super regional, being able to put Ryan Prager out there. You saw the start he was able to put together against Texas. They're not in that game if he doesn't. He made obviously 2 mistakes and gives up 2 runs, but between him and Evan Aschenbach, and then you've got Shane Sadeo as kind of that second starter now. He put together a really nice start against Louisiana. From a pitching standpoint, it feels like they've got the pieces to be able to at least get some good starts out there, get some innings, and I just feel a little more confident in the A&M pitching staff heading into this series than maybe I did past years.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, last year it was walk every game, every second of the game, right? It was just walk. They issued free bases left and right, and this year under pitching coach Max Weiner, that hasn't been the thing. They have done a really good job of hitting that strike zone and not giving up free bases. I'd say that's the biggest difference with this pitching staff this year. And you mentioned 6 runs in 3 games, and 3 of those runs came in the 9th inning in garbage time against Louisiana. It's pretty impressive. I mean, really, we can talk about the hitting and we can talk about certain things, but the pitching was probably the most encouraging thing from that series and from that weekend. And you love what you saw from Shane Sadeo. You love what you saw from Chris Cortez against Louisiana. Evan Aschenbach was incredible as usual against Texas. I mean, that guy, I just can't say good things about him. Every time he goes out there, it is the most automatic thing. I mean, it's almost like I remember I'm blanking on his name from a couple of years ago. The reliever they had from
Moo Menifee?
No, from Oregon State. I want to say he's from the Pac-12. The transfer they had. I mean, this guy was like, I think he was All-American. Like, he was really, really good. How am I blanking on this guy? I need help. But he reminds me of him, where it was just so automatic that it was like, oh my gosh, there's just no one can hit on this guy. So to have him and to pair him with Ryan Prager, you're pretty much guaranteeing an automatic win. And Schlossnagle set it up to where, hey, we're not going to throw the best 2 guys against Grambling. We're going to save them against Texas, and it really paid off for them. And you don't handle a super regional like that because every game pretty much equally matters. And so
he's
going to throw Ryan Prager game 1. He's going to throw Evan Aschenbeck game 1. And if he can save Aschenbeck for game 3, depending on what his pitch count looks like. But, yeah, I mean, to have those two that you can just pair together, there's been some games this season where, Prager goes 6 or 7 innings and then Aschenbeck handles the rest. And then you got your entire bullpen that you can use for the other 2 games. I mean, that's a real weapon to have where, you don't have a tired team, a tired pitching staff. You can kind of be all hands on deck for those game 2s and 3s for the most part. I think that the trick has been, they've had a couple guys go in and out, with Justin Lampkin and Tanner Jones, struggling with consistency at times. Shane Sadeo has been in a lot of roles for this team. He's been a starter. He's been a reliever, long reliever. Chris Cortez, same thing. And so, sometimes finding that second and third guy can be the challenge. But again, when you can stagger it to where, hey, you're good game 1, you've won that game, and then you can basically just lean on whoever's hot. That's a pretty nice weapon to have, and I think it'll really suit them in a super regional format.
And you talk about Chris Cortez, talk about biggest differences between last year and this year. He comes out in that Louisiana game and the performance that he put together. I think he struck out 6 of the 8 batters. He was six of the batters he faced. Just really good work by him. And yeah, that game 3 starter could be kind of the question mark. Do they go back to Tanner Jones again for game 3 if it gets there? I mean, Jim Schlossnagle wasn't exactly thrilled with the start that I think he called it very mediocre. The start that he put together against Grambling, struggled with his off-speed stuff. What they do in game 3, you can kind of figure that out. But between Brad Rudis and Chris Cortez and Evan Aschenbeck, Brock Perry, there's guys that you can bring out of the bullpen and really feel good about things. We're going to turn our attention after, if you're listening to this on video, hang with us. If you listen to us on audio on Spotify or iTunes, we're going to take a quick break. But after we turn from that quick break, we're going to talk about Oregon and get a little bit deeper dive into the Ducks and what to expect heading into this weekend. Stay tuned. Welcome back into the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Carter Karels. Carter, you just texted me. You remember the name and it came to you. Jacob Palish is who you were trying to think of. So
from Stanford, now Oregon State. I was thinking of Troy Klon, fan from Oregon State. I'm so embarrassed. So please don't give me a hard time. I was on my honeymoon. I don't know what I'm thinking.
It happens. We're getting back in the flow, right? We're getting back in the rhythm. But name came to him. So we're I was trying to play kind of mind reader over here and guess where you were going with that. But Oregon, let's dive into them for a little bit. You mentioned that starting pitching. What else kind of caught your eye? I know you did a deep dive, and I highly recommend folks head over to the site and check that out with a couple things to know about Oregon. What stood out as you kind of studied them heading into this weekend?
Yeah, the thing with Oregon is they just haven't had the history baseball wise. And I mean, you look, they haven't made a College World Series since 1954. This is their second straight super regional they've made, and that's the first time that's ever happened. They've been on the rise. This is a program that 4 straight postseason appearances, as I said, 2 straight super regionals. So it's a program you haven't heard of a whole lot. I mean, obviously everyone knows Oregon, but Oregon baseball has not been this widely successful program over the years. And, they're starting to have success. And so that was one of the things. And, starting pitching was certainly the biggest thing that jumped out. I mean, they had a guy, their third best starter, Kevin Sider, he pitched, I'm going to look this up, 128 pitches, I think it was, in one of those games last weekend. He's the transfer from Quinnipiac. 128, pitched a complete game shutout for them, and that's their third best guy. So for your third best guy to be capable of something like that is pretty impressive. As I said, only 6 pitchers that they've used, so they're pretty well rested. The starters, they pitched 29 innings as a team, and 23 of those innings came from their starters. So they've got a pretty rested bullpen going into this series. Offensively, they kind of like the long ball. They're not, a team that averages well and some of the key metrics like batting average and on base percentage and walks and those sort of things. But they are pretty good at hitting a home run. They've got 4 guys that have double-digit homers this season, and they are, among the best in home runs per game. So that's something to watch, certainly, because, this is a team that has done a really good job with not giving up walks at A&M. So if you can take advantage of that and just limit that long ball, then you can find an advantage. But outside of that, still learning a lot more about this team. But yeah, it seems like a pretty good offense, not amazing. And, their pitching has been one of their strengths. They're top 30 in ERA. They've been pretty good at, striking out guys and things like that. So that's kind of the thing to watch. But offensively, it's the long ball for them.
And then I know a big storyline, obviously Braden Montgomery kind of talked about it coming out of the regionals, guy that has never beaten Oregon in a series. And he kind of talked about that's one of his motivations heading into this weekend is to get over the hump and beat Oregon in a series. And, it's going to be interesting because if you're this A&M lineup, obviously patience is the big thing. You're kind of trying to, get on base, maybe drive up these pitch counts and that might be the way to kind of beat this team, is to try to get into that bullpen a little bit more. And, that patient approach and working the count. It's going to be interesting to see how they choose to kind of attack this Oregon pitching staff, because obviously it's been talked about a bunch on the board, taking the first pitch and kind of being patient. It's going to be interesting to see how this lineup, which again, can they build off Sunday against Louisiana? We'll see. Going to get a good test, and we're probably going to find out pretty quickly how, where this lineup kind of is. But going to be a fascinating weekend on that front. If you look at A&M's side of things, who are maybe 3 key players? If I gave you 3 key players to watch and guys that would be pivotal to help A&M get to a College World Series, are there names that come to mind? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, but are there names that come to mind?
Yeah. I think if you don't get a good start from Prager and win that game 1, you're putting yourself in a hole there, because, if he lasts 4 innings and gives up 4 or 5 runs, and then you got to go deep into your bullpen, and then guys aren't as rested game 2 and game 3, and Oregon's won game 1, that's Ryan Prager starts are almost like an auto win for this team. So if he has a bad start and they don't win game 1, you're putting yourself in a bind. So I'd say he's a key there, and I expect him to have another great start. So I'd say him. Offensively, Braden Montgomery, he had his struggles there.
Stars have to show. Yep.
And he kind of broke through last weekend and had a great game against Louisiana. He had a hit against Texas. Can he be the guy that he was for the first big part of that season? Gavin Grahovic is another one, right? You're a true freshman in your first pro season ever. How do you handle that? He had his struggles last weekend for sure. And we're talking about one of the best freshmen in the country, been amazing all year. But when those lights get a little brighter, when it's, a little bit bigger of a stage, how do you handle things? I thought Hayden Schott had his struggles last weekend, and he kind of broke through at the end. So, can the middle part of the lineup be strong? I mean, I could name a lot of guys, but those are kind of the guys that come to mind. And with A&M, I should mention, getting Oregon was a really good draw for them, because Oregon, they've got a good team, but they were a 3 seed. They weren't this amazing team in the Pac-12. They finished third, but it's not like they were playing this great competition all year. And I think the fact that A&M gets to host obviously is a huge benefit. But to play a team like Oregon, I mean, they're one of the worst teams remaining in the postseason. They're not Evansville, but when you look at kind of the Vegas odds for this series, I think A&M has the second highest odds to win the series out of the 8 other series, and the only other one that beats them is Tennessee Evansville, which is pretty much a gimme, you would think, for Tennessee. And then as far as like winning the College World Series, Tennessee's at plus 275. Bet 100, you win 275, and A&M's at plus 300. They're the 2 highest, and by a pretty significant margin. I think State was at plus 800. I think a couple other teams are about plus 850, plus 900. So Tennessee and A&M right now going into the Super Regionals are the heavy favorites picked to win the College World Series. So A&M getting this draw, I think it's pretty good. I mean, UC Santa Barbara, I don't know if they were a world beater, but to avoid them, I think was a nice thing for A&M, and I think because of that too, coupled with the success A&M's had this season, there will be pressure to deliver this weekend. You don't make the College World Series with a team like this, be a pretty disappointing end result. So a lot going on this weekend, and A&M should be able to handle it. And like I said, Prager, you get through that first game, you're 1-0, you could sweep this thing.
Yeah. And you look at A&M too, and I think this is another thing that's kind of important to mention, and then continued last weekend, only lost 3 games at home all season. And so you look at what this team, and these are going to be 3 of the best, if it goes 3 games, going to be the 3 best crowds they probably have all year. That Texas game was obviously electric, but this team has, been in some battles at home and have found a way to win, and only 3 losses at home all season. And so this team has been pretty darn tough to beat. Obviously they had their struggles the last month of the season. 2 of those series were on the road at LSU and at Ole Miss. And then obviously going to the SEC tournament was a struggle. But aside from that, this team's been really, really hard to beat at home. So going to be a big weekend. And A&M's obviously hosting a massive official visitor weekend. As a reminder to those listening, we've got a 60% off promo running on the site right now. A great time to sign up and get all your intel, get all, with fall camp around the corner. Just a great time to sign up. Carter, any final thoughts on this series and this weekend going forward?
Yeah, one thing just to touch on, this is a Saturday through Monday series, different from the Friday through Sunday that some of the other teams are having. And I actually like how that benefits A&M because they got done Sunday. They slept in their beds all weekend. They slept in their beds all week, and they're getting 6 days rest before playing Saturday. And you could make an argument that this team, part of their struggles down the stretch, had to do with just the length of the season. And I think that Schloss really went for that undefeated non-conference record. You had a lot of your top guys playing in those midweek games against the Tarleton States of the world. And, that may have taken a physical toll on this team playing every single game. And so rest, I think, may be one of the biggest things that will help A&M coming into the series, not just being able to stay at home, but going from Sunday to Saturday between games, I think could really help this team.
And you look at it too, like off that point, you look at the SEC tournament, right? And obviously you never want to lose early in that tournament. But for A&M, it gave them basically a week off before they started regional play. And I think it was Jace Lavalette who talked about it. Jackson Appel talked about it a little bit, what that did for their bodies and how that helped, and how when they came back to work, I think they got 3 full days off, when they got back from the SEC tournament, and how there was kind of talk amongst the locker room to that point of, man, like this is as good as, you know, body wise they felt in the last couple of weeks. And so, you know, I think there's certain credence to that. And so basically having played 3 games in 2 weeks roughly, should definitely help in terms of rest, getting off their feet. And they should be ready to go. I mean, if you have, there's going to be nagging injuries this time of the year, and that's just part of a long season. But to that freshness point, I think you've certainly got a point there in terms of that helping. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close this down. Carter's got to get to all the press conferences this afternoon as media day kind of gets underway this afternoon. And so be sure to head over to the GigEm247 site. We'll have coverage all weekend from the visitor weekend, press conferences, all 3 games. Carter will be on site for those. And so it's a great weekend to stay locked in on GigEm247. And if you listen to this on YouTube, be sure to like and share these videos. Be sure to listen to us on Spotify and iTunes if that's where you get your podcasts. And again, be sure to take advantage of that 60% off promo. Going to be one of the best promos all year for new subscribers. So if you're listening, that's certainly something to check out. And if with that, enjoy this weekend, enjoy the Super Regional, and we will see you guys soon.